Well, Carine Kanimba is Paul Rusesabagina's daughter. She joins us now live from Brussels over Skype. Thanks for joining us. Firstly, during the dark days of the Rwandan genocide, your father was very much hailed as a hero. Now he's in Rwanda in handcuffs. How do you explain this?
Yes, so after the release of Hotel Rwanda in 2004, at first the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, praised the movie. He loved the movie and actually offered my father a position within his government, ambassadorship, ministerships, anything that he wanted. But my father, who's always stood up for his principles, has always been about human rights and about peace, refused those positions and instead used his newly gained international platform to continue to advocate for human rights, for peace, for justice, and for reconciliation. In advocating for human rights and peace, he also had to call out the human rights violations being committed until today by the Rwandan government and Paul Kagame himself. And Paul Kagame did not like this. He's currently a dictator in Rwanda, and anybody who speaks up against a dictatorship is either jailed, killed, or kidnapped.
And these are very, very serious charges against your father. We're talking about murder, armed robbery, being a member of a terrorist organisation. What do you expect will be the likely consequence of all of this?
So those charges are in fact ludicrous. That's not who my father is. As a matter of fact, the Rwandan government has tried multiple times to bring about crazy charges against him. They started off by calling him a genocide denier and a negationist. That did not fit because he just made a movie about the genocide. Afterwards, they tried to say that he was funding rebel groups in the Congo. That was in 2010. That did not work because they falsified receipts and said that he was in the U.S. when actually, and on the dates that they falsified those receipts, those Western Union receipts, he was in Ireland. So that did not fit either. So it's been for many years that the Rwandan government tries to bring on false charges against him, to smear his name, so to make him lose credibility. And so what we expect from this, there's no fair trial, there's no justice. He was kidnapped to Rwanda. So we do not expect anything from the Rwandan government other than a sham trial and theater like we saw today.
And since your father was arrested whilst actually in Dubai and taken on a flight to Rwanda, could you give us a sense of what you and the rest of the family were able to glean specifically about that arrest and also where he is now? Have you been able to talk to him, for instance?
Yeah, he wasn't arrested in Dubai. He was kidnapped in Dubai and taken to Rwanda forcefully, where he was then held in an unknown location for 3 days, where his hands were tied, his legs were tied, and he was blindfolded. And mind you, he's a almost 70-year-old man, and so that's actually the international definition of torture. He was tortured for those 3 days, taken to the hospital afterwards at 3 different instances, and the Rwandan government refuses to give us the details of those hospital visits. Last time we spoke with him, we speak with him every Friday for only 5 minutes. During those 5 minutes, he sounds like that there are Rwandan authorities behind him, around him, keeping him from saying anything that is meaningful or for us to say anything that's meaningful. And when we do start sharing valuable information, somehow the phone cuts off. So they are trying to forbid him from not only having a defense and defending himself, but also communicating for his family. To add on.
No, we're actually looking at pictures of your father receiving an award from George W. Bush. He clearly has very strong friends in various different places in the world. What are you hearing from those who have praised him for his human rights work, for instance?
Exactly. So he's done so much work and he's been rewarded by various organizations. And he, first of all, the U.S. Congress just yesterday released a letter that they sent to Paul Kagame asking him to release him immediately and unconditionally. They call into question the U.S. and Rwandan relations. They tell the Rwandan government, the Rwandan president, that the U.S. and Rwandan relations are at risk if they do not release my father. They also call out the reputation of Rwanda that is at risk if they continue this sham trial. In addition to this, the European Union, the Parliament of Europe, collectively condemned Paul Kagame last week for the kidnapping of my father, for keeping him incommunicado and torturing him for various days. And so we are hoping for more and more international pressure and essentially sanctions. It would be the next step, economic sanctions and much more if it gets to this, for Paul Kagame to release him. This is a violation. Kidnapping my father without extradition, without legal procedures, is a violation of international law and violation of the treaties Rwanda signed internationally. So.
Carine Kanimba, daughter of Paul Rusesabagina, thank you very much for that. And just to add, We've also heard from the United States that are urging the